Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us. We have Michelle Needens here to present for our Pocket Talk. So, Michelle, thank you for agreeing to present for us today, and I will go on ahead and turn it over to you.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone, and happy looking forward to time off and Thanksgiving. I hope for everybody next week. We're going to talk today about the Mood and Behavior Guidebook and how to really incorporate that in work with individuals and family. I have been working with individuals with cognitive problems for a long time. There were years where we really thought, and we had this dialogue, that some of the mood and behavioral challenges were to be expected with dementia, and there certainly are those vulnerabilities to the mood and behavior challenges. But what they do is represent a puzzle for individuals. So, and it's our responsibility to kind of help families figure out those puzzle pieces. It's actually one of the areas where we can make the biggest difference with care partners. If you've been on these talks prior, you've heard me say that these mood and behavior issues are the number one reason for caregiver burden. They are the trigger for caregiver depression, oftentimes. And the root for a set of people living with these cognitive disorders, it is triggered by depression in themselves. So it's a puzzle to be figured out. So we have a guidebook to kind of walk through that, and we're going to talk about the use of that. I think all of us want tools in our toolkit, not so much because we need new information. Maybe we do, maybe we don't. But to find pathways to support families who really learn, adapt, and change their own comportment because of different avenues of intervention. So why a guidebook? Number one, provides a tool for us to think about mood and behavior challenges. And we'll walk through it here in a little bit, but there's three distinctive sections. So when we say guidebook, we are not talking about a guidebook where you pick it up and there's tons of narrative and you read through paragraphs. It's really bullet points. And so it is a decision tree to some degree. So really looking at behaviors, possible reasons, and possible interventions. They are not, the list is not conclusive. There would be no way to make such a list conclusive. But it is as many as we can think of that we regularly see. You know, the puzzle pieces are always figured out by the person who is experiencing those symptoms, in their context, in their world, in their environment. But there are some common reasons for us to explore. So it gives us ourselves an opportunity to kind of think through and articulate, here might be some things going on. And I'll give some examples here in a little bit. It replaces assumptions with a thought process. And let's talk about a key example there. I have had families who come in and say that their loved one exited the home or attempted to exit the home, and have been told that, gosh, wandering is part of disease process. Well, wandering is the symptom, it isn't the reason, and it's hard to construct interventions around a symptom rather than the underlying reason with these behavioral challenges. So wandering, for example, this exit seeking, for example, can be related to depression, can be related to psychosis separate from depression, can be related to confusion, can be related to boredom, can be related to medication side effects, delirium, and the list goes on. So really looking at those things. What we don't want to do is come to a conclusion. For example, gosh, my loved one has been exiting, and the answer is placement. That's not what we want. We want, okay, why? Let's figure out the why. Placement may be an answer. It may not be an answer. It may be something that is remittable if it were delirium related, etc. So it really replaces the automatic conclusion with a thought process. And that's what's really important. Can increase a sense of control. So part of the use of the guidebook is to support families. I mean, we may know all that information. We may or may not, depending on I know there's a variety of disciplines on this call. We may have the time to walk through it. We may not have the time to walk through it, but we can support them in walking through a process that it isn't this inevitable of which they have no control. It's not this is what happens and left on their own, but rather it gives them a kind of step-by-step idea of what they might try, and gives them some ideas and opens up some ideas of their own. The guidebook, again, is bullet points, which makes it more accessible than academic narrative for individuals, and that's what we wanted. We wanted it to be a tool that could be used by all, could be used by professionals in terms of support of families, but also could be used by families and all kinds of professionals and paraprofessionals. And can be shared to facilitate therapeutic discussion. So it kind of gives this objective tool to facilitate discussions among family members. And guess what? Not all family members are always on the same page. If you've worked with families walking through this journey any length of time, more than 3.5 minutes, you know that families are not always, in fact, rarely on the same page. And so bringing people together in a sense to facilitate, gosh, how do we approach this in the best way possible? So we list in the guide the most common mood and behavioral challenges, and that includes those that we consider not only problematic to the person, but problematic to those around them. You know, agitation, resisting personal care. We talked about wondering, anxiety, the psychosis element, misidentifying people, those kind of challenges, but also addresses some of the what I consider the quieter mood and behavioral challenges, the isolation that can occur, and those behaviors that fall more in terms of reduced quality of life rather than problematic to others. The second section looks at possible contributors to those challenges, and then lastly, interventions. And we'll walk through the guide here in a minute, but it gives us the opportunity to kind of click through to sections so we can jump through possible answers. So these are possible benefits, and the last one I think is also central, that it gives us some phrases. It gives us a guide when we're making care plans for those of you who might work in long-term care or work in home health or are developing treatment plans, that it could be utilized in that. And it's created in a way, and certainly PDF, where you could print off one page that, you know, you look at these guides and materials, and families very quickly get overwhelmed with information, and sometimes it's just printing off a page for them or including a page in their post-visit summary so that they can refer to it rather than the entire guide. So again, part of what we do in our work with families is not only to provide education, but support a confidence building in how they address the problems that come up. And it is inevitable that problems will come up. I mean, you're walking down an entirely new path. Communication has to shift dramatically. It challenges some of our even core beliefs in some way. I mean, I just had a conversation with a family this morning. The woman is solidly in middle stage. Lots and lots of executive function weaknesses, short-term memory very impaired. Part of her experience is confabulating. She misplaces things and then accuses people of stealing. So we have all of this distress and agitation going on. They are trying to convince her to do certain things. They're trying to convince her, this son, trying to convince her that what they're doing is for her benefit because of her impairment. And of course, she's not connecting with any of that. And so this dramatic shift, which eventually for him is going to include therapeutic fibbing, and he says, I can't. Well, let's talk about why that is ethical. Let's talk about why that's the appropriate action to take in this place. And what I always tell people is, let's not ask people with 2 broken legs to get up and run and to really think through that. But it takes this mental shift. And so not only do the people with disease lose their confidence, but families don't have any confidence in managing some of the rough water. So I think, part of the guidebook is to support conversations that help people become more confident in their actions. And then we have a lot of families who are just absolutely doing the right thing. They come by it naturally, they figure it out. They figure out what's best and make those adaptions. And yet they'll still say to all of us, I don't know if I'm doing the right things. I don't think I'm helping her at all, because what they really want to do is something they cannot do, and that's cure. But you are helping. And to look at an objective document and say, look at all these things you're doing. Somehow you figure that out on your own. And to that we say hallelujah. So all of those things are confidence buildings. With healthcare professionals, to validate your own assessment and concerns. Sometimes individuals are not necessarily forthcoming and walking through some of the reasons for some of these mood and behavioral challenges opens up a new kind of dialogue with individuals that's useful. So it opens up pathways that maybe wouldn't with straightforward questions. Again, a mechanism to deal with family conflict, rather than pointing finger at one family member, and a tool to explore areas of denial. And part of why the tool combats that is because we're not saying, oh, well, that's just part of the deal. We're saying, gosh, we're going to figure out this puzzle and we're going to keep moving through it. Many times it takes both pharmacologic action, which you heard Dr. Townley talk about a few months ago, as well as some of the non-pharmacologic interventions. Oftentimes it takes both. I think it is a guide for advocacy. To date, we do not have sufficient individuals that are used to and skilled in working with individuals with dementia. We just don't have enough. Services are still siloed, and yet we all see them. And so it's a tool for advocacy, whether it be facilities or community services or whatever. And I believe that it is a opportunity to support that empowerment to families as a whole. So I'm going to stop this share and let's look at the guide. We have lost it. Sorry, guys. I had it pulled up. But it doesn't seem to be here. Tina, is it possible that you can pull it up from our website?
Yes, I was actually going to suggest that. I was trying to put the chat in.
Here,
so let me.
I've got it.
Oh, you got it.
I think.
It took just a moment for me to download it too.
So this is at the end of the PowerPoint is the link for the guide, and Tina's going to put in the link. So each of you can pull it up and download it and have it. It's available in several ways. We do have hard copies, and if some of you say, gosh, I would really, really like the hard copy, I'm a hard copy person, they're created to be tented to set on a desk. The original intent was if there were professionals that it could set on a desk and be flipped through. So we do have hard copies, but it is available from our website, and the PDF is actually easily usable in the sense of you can click through to answers. Here we go, finally. So there is some introductory information about the use of the guide that's useful to you. Again, we do provide the guidebook to families if they ask us, but I always am calculating, is it useful for the family, or do they need a certain section? We have to make an assessment of how overwhelmed this family is. And even though I think it's a pretty easily usable guide for families that I know where they're struggling with depression and they're overwhelmed, I still print off various sections for them and just say, focus on this. So you have to determine. You are free to download, email it out, whatever is useful to you. But you think, from a therapeutic standpoint, I calculate what's best for that particular family member. So again, general kind of stuff, and then we get into the common mood and behavioral challenges, and there are a number. So you see here, some are affective elements like anxiety and depression. Some are behavioral in terms of like hiding and moving items, hoarding, refusing to eat, drink. And you can click on any one of these page numbers and it will take you to the next section. So for example, exiting behaviors, it will take you to section 2 and to the section where it says, what are the possible reasons? Are they bored? And that opens up this conversation of, do they have physical activity? Are we keeping people busy? Are they sitting around watching TV all day? And if so, how can we change that? What are the avenues? What are the possible interventions? Do we need to consider day program? Do we need to consider more help in the home? Are they alone while their care partner is working? And that's part of the problem. So really looking at boredom as an option. Adjustment to transition. We see people engage in exiting behaviors when they're new to facilities, especially if we have not laid down the architecture correctly prior to that transition. And what do I mean by that? That means treating depression prior to when they go in. Making sure we're not sending someone anxious and agitated into facility without trying to stabilize prior. It may mean that they don't have sufficient activities there in the facility, and we haven't crafted along with the facility kind of that transition plan. Anxiety may be part of the culprit. Often that's related to depression. That anxious depression, seldom is it separate. It's separate at times, especially with people who have had longstanding anxiety disorders, but the majority of the time, anxiety is really reflective of this anxious depression. Aimless and confused walking. Are they getting up to go to the bathroom and they just exited, the front door and couldn't get back? Urinary tract infection, which is a culprit. I just had a case the other day where the woman lives in a small community, but their house sets right off the main street. And she exited 3 times in 2 weeks and crossed that busy street, which is essentially a highway. And absolutely, she hadn't done it before. Husband took her to the ER, urinary tract infection resolved. We have not had exiting since the resolution of the UTI. Desire to go to fulfill former obligations. I need to get home to my kids. I need to get home to my mom and dad. I have a woman now I work with that that's the mantra. Probably 3 or 4 evenings a week is I need to see mom and dad. And so we've crafted some strategies around that. But this prior obligation, this sense of being in the wrong place, kind of a different version of psychosis where they see their home, but it doesn't feel like it's their home. So different strategies there. Shadowing, sometimes just following people out, a visitor, and they follow them out, whether that's at home or facility. History of regular physical activity. I worked with a woman who, she was used to walking 3 miles a day, and she definitely walked when she was irritated or upset or had a bad day, and she continued to want to do that. That had been her long-standing history. Pain, just not knowing what to do, and so moving. Hallucinations, delusions, looking for something. Medication side effects, as we indicate, and unmet needs. So we can go to any one of these so that we can review these and even add some and say maybe it's something else. But then we can click on, so maybe we decide it's boredom. Seldom is it one thing, it's often several things, but we're going to click through, and then it goes into the third section, which is possible interventions. So it lists different potential interventions to include. And so we can go through that on lots of things. So hallucinations and delusions, maybe we think it's depression. So we click through and possible interventions that we can try, such as providing structure and routine. And sometimes the interventions will lead us to another one. So when we have lack of structure, then that's going to tell us some suggestions too. So any of these numbers will be a click through. And that's how all of them go. So 3 sections, They're delineated by color, so very easy to just, click through and look at possible responses. So how do you access this? You access it in a variety of ways. As I said, there's an electronic version on our website. There is the hard copy if you would like it. And then, exciting as it is, an Apple app will be available after the first of the year. We're refining some of that. And it will be available in Android to follow. Tina can share if there's more about that, but just be on the lookout that after the first of the year, that may be that will be available on the app. So thank you. I know we've got about 2 minutes left. Any questions, thoughts?
Michelle, I'll just add, I went on ahead and put the link in the chat for everyone. And yes, we hope to have that app available soon in both English and Spanish. And I will follow up and make sure that this group is emailed with information about the app and how to access it. So be checking your email for that, and we will make sure and share it with everyone.
And feel free, if you download, to email out, share it out, share the link, whatever is useful. We want to support people in doing the best they can through what can be very tough water. All righty. If no questions, you enjoy the rest of this day and this weekend and the holiday, and I hope all of you get time off. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Michelle.
Thanks, Michelle.